Think about it, we have hospitals, epidurals, trained surgeons, and a whole medical system built just to make sure that both mom and baby survive the ordeal. Our ancestors had absolutely none of that. Instead, they had each other, a handful of herbs, prayers to gods, who were, let's be honest, unreliable, and a genuinely terrifying amount of pure hope. And here's the crazy part: for thousands of generations, that actually did the trick. But how did they actually survive? Before we get into that, let's get one thing straight. Giving birth back then was easily one of the most perilous things a woman could ever face. We aren't talking just scary and intense, we mean there was a massive risk you wouldn't make it out of that room alive. Ancient Greek grave markers called funerary steles show young mothers sitting down, saying a final goodbye to husbands and mothers clutching their newborns. Historians know exactly what that means. They lost their lives in childbirth. There were so many of these markers that we can actually track maternal deaths just through cemetery art. In ancient Rome, experts estimate that around 1 to 2% of births ended the mother's life. That might sound low, but when you realize they were expected to have 4, 5, even 6 kids minimum, sometimes more, the total risk over a lifetime was staggering. And infant survival rates were even worse. Archaeological findings suggest that in many historic societies, 30 to 50% of kids never made it to their 5th birthday. Some of those losses happened within days, some during the labor itself. This wasn't rare, it was simply life and death, completely bound together in the same room on that same night. So, when we think about how ancient women brought life into the world, they were doing something genuinely heroic every single time. Not metaphorically heroic, but actually heroic. Like, statistically speaking, this might kill me, but let's do it anyway. Now, let's get right to it. In almost every ancient culture on Earth, across every single continent and community, one thing was consistent: birth was women's business. Men did not attend births, not husbands, not fathers, not male doctors, unless things had gone terribly wrong and someone was about to die. Even then, it was strictly a last resort. The person who ran the show was the midwife. The word midwife literally means with woman in Old English, and that's exactly what she was: the companion who stayed with you through the whole ordeal, the one who knew what to do. Midwifery is actually one of the oldest professions in human history. We're talking about traces going back at least 40,000 years ago during the Paleolithic era. Just think about that. Before agriculture, before writing, before cities, and before pretty much anything we would recognize as civilization, women were already helping other women deliver babies. Early midwives didn't learn from textbooks, they learned by watching. They closely observed how animals gave birth, how their mammals positioned themselves, and how they managed pain. What they did by instinct, and they passed that wisdom down to human births. This wisdom passed from mother to daughter, from elder to apprentice, generation after generation. By the time we look at ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, the midwife had become a respected and essential figure in society. Not always wealthy, often working class, but absolutely vital. In ancient Rome, a good midwife was literally worth her weight in gold. Take Cyrannus of Ephesus. He was one of our best sources on ancient gynecology. Tend a whole book called Gynecology, way back in the 2nd century, where he lays out exactly what a perfect midwife had to be like. She should be calm, sharp, and crucially, she needed to have small hands. Highly important, as we will discuss. She had to be trained in theory, not just hands-on work. Plus, she needed to know her herbs and remedies. She could not be superstitious either, and she had to be fearless. Also, Cyrannus suggests she must be sober, which implies that not all of them were. In most ancient societies, women did not actually give birth in a hospital, of course, but they also, surprisingly, rarely gave birth in their own everyday bedrooms. Back in ancient Greece and Rome, delivery often took place in a totally separate space inside the house. Often this was the cubiculum, a private room prepped specially for the event. It had to be warm, dimly lit, and crowded with the women ready to help, like female relatives, close friends, the midwife, and sometimes her assistants. Over in ancient Egypt, experts have uncovered traces of dedicated birth houses, small structures built near temples where divine births of gods were carved right onto the walls in beautiful carvings. Whether average Egyptian women used these special spaces is debated, but the meaning tells us everything. Giving birth was sacred enough to have its own sanctuary. In ancient China, a mother was typically kept in a single room of the house for a whole month around the birth, a tradition that still echoes in modern Chinese postpartum care today. The goal was to keep her warm and shielded from drafts, and kept far from anything that could bring bad luck. Across the ancient world, there was this massive focus on spiritually protecting the birth space. They would prep the room with special prayers, rituals, charms, and gifts. In ancient Egypt, the goddess Tauret, a pretty terrifying figure with a hippo body and a crocodile tail, plus the heavy legs of a lion, was the main protector of pregnant moms and childbirth. They placed statues of her in delivery rooms, wore amulets, and begged her for help during labor. And honestly, if a creature that looked like some hippo, crocodile, lion beast was guarding you while you were giving birth, you would probably feel safer too. At least nothing else in there was creepier than the decor. In Rome and Greece, women prayed to Juno Lucina, the goddess who brings light, meaning she helps deliver babies into the world. Diana, Artemis, and Hero were too. Every ancient culture had divine guardians of birth, and they were called upon with urgent prayers. But here is where things get fascinating, and where modern medicine starts looking pretty strange. Most of us are so used to women lying flat on their backs to give birth, hospital beds, legs up, the whole setup. But here is the kicker: that position is actually a relatively new invention, popularized across Europe in the 17th century, mostly because it was just more convenient for doctors to watch and interfere. But ancient women never did that. Ancient mothers gave birth upright, almost universally, standing, squatting, kneeling, sitting, using actual positions that harness gravity, as in the actual physical force pulling things down to help nudge the baby in the right direction, which, when you think about it, makes a ton of sense. The most common labor position in ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, the Middle East, and China was squatting. In fact, squatting over a specially made birthing stool or a birthing brick. This stool was a crescent or U-shaped seat with an open middle, letting midwives easily reach in from below. The mother sat there, supported from behind by an assistant, while the midwife knelt or squatted right in front. In ancient Egypt, researchers have actually dug up birthing bricks, real bricks made of Nile clay, that women squatted on during labor. In 2001, a discovery at the site of Abydos revealed a painted brick from 1750 BC, decorated with art of a mother holding her newborn, surrounded by protective figures. These bricks weren't just handy tools, they were ritual objects, almost sacred furniture. The Ebers Papyrus, one of our oldest medical scrolls from ancient Egypt, dating to -150 BC, contains actual instructions for assisting birth, outlining magical spells, herbal remedies, and physical methods. Some of this is actually useful, while other parts invoke the goddess Isis, often at the same time. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the incredibly painful, extremely painful, unmedicated labor contractions of labor. Epidurals didn't exist. Anesthesia didn't exist. The idea of painless childbirth as a medical goal was completely foreign, but they had a remarkable toolkit of herbal remedies that ancient midwives and healers used to ease pain, speed up labor, soothe anxiety, and reduce bleeding complications. Over in ancient Egypt, women took special mixtures containing things like opium poppies, yes, seriously, plus those juniper berries, which they thought would speed up labor contractions. Other recipes used oils, fats, and herbal extracts rubbed on the skin or swallowed. In ancient Greece and Rome, plenty of plants were used. Pennyroyal, Artemisia, Andrew helped to trigger those contractions. Saffron was used, like medicine. Good old wine, yes, real alcohol, was given to moms in labor to soothe and kill pain, not to knock her out, but just to take the edge off. In vena veritas, and maybe also in vena childbirth, Soranus recommended that midwives prepare warm compresses, soothing oils for massage, and special plant remedies to relax the birth canal for an easier delivery. He even explained how to massage the mom's belly and skin with olive oil, a trick that modern science has actually proven is genuinely helpful. Other cultures relied on mental pain relief tricks, constant comfort from the other women, chanting, music, and rhythmic breathing. Not some structured class you'd take in a modern prenatal class, but the natural kind that comes from pure pain and being surrounded by women who breathe with you, singing, and telling you everything will be fine. The community side of ancient childbirth cannot be ignored. A mother was never alone. She was cradled by every female relative and friend they could find. They held her up both physically and emotionally. They whispered in her ear. They told her stories of other successful home births. They reminded her of her own power. There is something powerful about that. A room packed with women sharing this intense experience, relying on deep, collective wisdom that modern science is only just starting to rediscover with the rise of doulas and group pregnancy care. But not every birth went smoothly, did it? The ancients had to face brutal complications that we would fix with a quick C-section, some forceps, or modern surgery. None of those things even existed back then. The ultimate nightmare was always a baby stuck in the wrong position. A baby facing feet first instead of head first was basically a death sentence for both mom and baby. Soranus wrote about a way to manually turn the baby inside the womb, a method called version. It needed exactly what he said an ideal midwife must have: small hands and a ton of courage. It was not gentle, but it actually worked enough that talented midwives were highly sought after just to do it. Another terrifying nightmare was obstructed labor, where the baby simply could not squeeze through without surgery. This process dragged on for hours or days. Mothers and infants died. In the worst-case scenarios, doctors resorted to a dark procedure. If the baby had passed away and simply could not be delivered, they had to remove it in pieces just to save the mother. The records describing these steps are not easy reads. They are clinical, unflinching, and incredibly sobering. These healers did the best they could with what they had, and that was sheer bravery and incredibly sharp instruments. A C-section, as we know it, was never done on living women back then to save both lives. The surgery only existed in another form. Roman law actually demanded that a baby be cut from a deceased mother before burial, just to try saving the infant. Some ancient myths and religious tales describe famous figures being born by cesarean, like the Chinese cultural hero Ta Yu, and various Roman and Greek godlike figures, but as a standard medical procedure done on living mothers that arrived much later. Of all those ancient civilizations, Egypt is arguably the most impressive when it comes to organized women's medicine. They had medical schools built inside temples, and some of those schools welcomed women, female healers, female doctors, female midwives, all recorded in Egyptian records. That Lady of Life title went to some of those healers. Their knowledge of anatomy, their use of herbal medicine, and their record keeping, all of it was incredibly advanced. For that era, the Kahun Papyrus, dating to about 1825 BC, the oldest gynecological text in human history. It covers things like pregnancy tests, fertility, birth control, and difficulties during labor. One test for pregnancy actually involved placing an onion or garlic clove near her cervix overnight. If her breath smelled like it by morning, she wasn't pregnant. Does this actually work? No. But is it one of the wildest medical instructions ever written down? Absolutely. Egyptian women also had access to surprisingly effective forms of birth control. including a pessary made of crocodile dung, honey, and natron. Modern science shows that crocodile dung is actually alkaline, meaning it would function as a spermicide. Ancient Egyptian women literally used crocodile dung. Let that sink in. In ancient China, the custom of zuoyuezi, or sitting a month, wrapping new mothers in an elaborate routine of postpartum care. This entire process recognized that delivery drained a mother's vital energy, or qi, so a full month of resting, eating special foods, and staying warm was crucial to heal her. During labor, upright positions were the norm. Ancient Chinese texts from the Han Dynasty actually show them using herbs to help speed up contractions, manage pain, and halt severe bleeding. This organized system of Eastern medicine meant these methods were carefully documented and passed down through generations, rivaling practically anything seen in the West. At first, Chinese midwives were just experienced neighborhood women who had delivered babies themselves and helped others. Over time, though, especially during the Song Dynasty, formal roles started emerging. This birthing wisdom was passed down through families and communities, meaning what we call traditional today actually goes back thousands of years, but delivering was only the start. In almost every ancient society, the post-birth process was just as deeply ritualized and crucial as the labor itself. In ancient Rome, they laid newborns on the cold ground. The anxious father, who was waiting outside, would finally be called in. He would carefully inspect the baby. If he picked the child up, he accepted them right into the family. But if he did not, well, history gets dark. Babies who seemed far too frail, too small, deformed, or simply unwanted because of poverty or because of their gender in a society that prefer boys, were often abandoned outdoors, left outside to die. Completely legal, it happened all the time, a harsh reality that ancient mothers and midwives simply had to live with. In ancient Egypt, the moments right after birth were packed with sacred rituals, like cutting the umbilical cord, using very specific methods, or wrapping babies in special fabrics, while reciting protective prayers. Tawaret and Bessie was a fierce dwarf god who protected families and young children, was shown scowling fiercely, just to scare off bad spirits. Both gods were called upon. In many old cultures, the placenta was treated with massive respect. In ancient Egypt, the royal placenta had its own special symbol, its own hieroglyph, and was paraded around like a spiritual twin of the king. The Maori of New Zealand buried it deep in the ground. Their word for both land and placenta is the same, whenua. That tie between birth and the ground, the body and soil, was not just symbolic, it was real. But here is what really hits you. Looking at all this, those ancient moms were not helpless, they were not clueless, they did not just suffer through a mystery. These women had thousands of years of deep wisdom, passed down through generations, from mother to daughter. They knew the human body, maybe not our modern medical terms, but functionally. They knew their herbal remedies. They knew the power of warmth, positioning, and mental comfort. They were practicing real science long before the name existed. They practiced medicine before degrees even existed. Sure, death rates were much higher. They had fewer tools, and things went terribly wrong in ways they couldn't fix. Still, the core of what they were doing, supporting a mother through the most intense physical challenge a human body can ever undergo, using every tool they had, with skilled hands and deep wisdom, that is not actually that different from what midwives do today. Modern obstetrics did not just appear overnight, it built on a foundation of ancient knowledge, ancient practices, and women who paid close attention and passed down what they learned. Those early midwives of Egypt, ancient Rome, and ancient China are the true ancestors of every labor specialist working today, and every single mother who has delivered in any century, country, or under any condition. Joys an unbroken line going back 40,000 years. That is massive. That is everything. We end where we started, with a woman in labor, surrounded by supportive women doing the most ancient miracle a human body can perform. The tools have changed, the survival rates have skyrocketed dramatically, beautifully, thanks to modern science and medicine, plus decades of dedication. A mother giving birth in a hospital today has access to life-saving tools that would have looked like pure magic to Soranus of Ephesus. Those mortality rates that once overshadowed childbirth have dropped to nearly zero in many parts of the world. Yet, the main things haven't changed. The raw fear, pain, and hope. The room filled with people loving you. That moment when a new baby arrives and everything gets incredibly loud, then somehow quiet. Ancient women knew that moment. They lived for it. They died for it. Giving birth while squatting on clay bricks, praying to hippo goddesses, sipping herbal wine for pain, surrounded by every woman they love, them, begging any god who might just listen. And guess what? It actually worked. Most of the time. So, if your own mom is still around, maybe shoot her a text, just saying,